That was Langston Hughes's words. All forms of art invite us to approach the guts and glory of the human experience from a vantage of metaphor, a comparison that approximates instead of telling a noble truth directly. Paint, shadow, staging, notes, movement. They are all tools of the artist. A poet employs the imagery of the senses, the juxtaposition of ideas, the shock of line breaks, the delicacy of punctuation, and the ride of rhythm and sometimes rhyme. An awesome woman born in the 19th century in Massachusetts, Emily Dickinson, defines poetry in a way that jazzes me. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. Too bright for our infirm delight, the truth's superb surprise. As lightning to the children eased with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. Magic art can do. It can transform us, help us to our next stage in life. It can make us recognize something new in ourselves. When did you first realize you had secret skills? Or when you could know something without actually full reading comprehension? For me, it was Lewis Carroll's childhood poem with many made-up words. I used to think I needed to know all the words of something to understand it. This poem, which I performed in full with Isaac Dickinson at the RE Talent Show 4 years ago on this very chancel, showed me that I can grab deep and abiding meaning through my senses. Here's the first stanza, and if you haven't memorized this poem, put it on your to-do list. Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe, all mimsy were the borogroves and the mome raths outgrabe. And the poem goes on in a quite understandable way about a fight with a pretend monster. Now, the utilitarian side of this poem is represented in a tweet last week from a guy named Wilson Bates, who says this: being vaccinated does not mean you can gyre and gimble in the wabe. Remember that the borogroves are still all mimsy, and the mome raths outgrabe. Now, by college, I had come to know poetry as a luxurious private enjoyment, a trip, an experience. I could go with the poem. I could even test my literary senses and the allusions that were referenced in the poems. And also in college, I knew there was serious work to be done. And this serious work needed speeches, better legislation written, marketing campaigns, advocacy. So in the midst of my protesting, to get my college to divest from South Africa, I heard this obscure poem out of called A Diamond by Joel Guns. There was a woman in a jewelry store trying on diamond earrings. She didn't know she was also wearing crystallized tears wept by thousands of black miners. Diamonds have an inner facet not often talked about by the salesman at Zales or Tiffany's. That facet is clouded with thousands of people choking and dying from intense heat and dust. Masses of black people forced by poverty to drain, chop, stab, burn, and suck the land of its riches until it becomes nothing more than dead gravel. Afterwards, as superfluous appendages, they are forced to live on it. Their crystallized tears are bought by white people who wear them around their necks, wrists, and fingers, shamelessly advertising the spilled blood of the Zulu and Xhosa. I began to see the connection between policy, history, consumer choices, and art. And now, let me share one stanza of a poem that firmly places my UUism in the sacred cavity of my life. My spirituality can best be summarized as connection, no separation. I'm thankful that as a child, when I heard God is not a person, God is everywhere, I left the normal religion at that point. And if God was everywhere, then it certainly was in me and everybody else I saw. It was in the rocks and the animals and the plants and the universe. Everything is divine. The entire poem is found in our hymnal, number 568, but I will read just the poem that speaks to my spirituality. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. You cannot always tell by looking what is happening. More than half the tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. Penetrate quietly as the earthworm that blows no trumpet. Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree. Spread like the squash plant that overruns the garden. Gnaw in the dark and use sun to make sugar. Weave real connections, create real nodes, and build real houses.
I remember when I was attending Strake Jesuit College Preparatory, I had my first experience, real experience, with poetry. It was the first time that I read a poem more than once Not because a teacher told me to, or my mom, or somebody else, but because I wanted to. It was the first time I studied the history and the context of a single poem to really try to understand the poem's deeper meaning. It all started with Kubla Khan by Samuel Coleridge. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alph, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground, with walls and towers, were girdled round. And there were gardens bright with sinuous rills, whose blossoms many an intense bearing tree. And here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. It's longer than that. And each time I read it through, the imagery of this poem became more vivid. I studied Coleridge and his writing style, and yes, I know he was an opium addict. But I wanted to emulate his writing style without the opium. I wanted to recreate the richness of imagery. I needed to write poetry. And it was the first time I felt like I could write, that I could capture the inexplicable, the emotional, the spiritual into words. It was the first time I was inspired, felt called to write poetry, delving deeper within myself for inspiration, as well as being open to inspiration that rose up spontaneously from the many experiences I had or insights I gained as I moved through life. I write poem after poem, nearly 100 of them, many on paper bags, as you will see on the screen. Paper bags from the department store where I worked, because I had nothing else to write on. And everything was inspiration. Even when I left my job, I wrote my fellow employees a poem. Farewell to my friends at Wienerland, for my departure is at hand. My life here has been fun, Diane's insults and Dorothy's pun. I will even miss our manager, so dear Mr. Molaski, though he seems mean and may sneer. He's fair and sweet, and I can get off when I need. Dear Pat Reeves, our Southern belle, looks over the bag department. It looks like hell. It went on from there. Let's remember I was young when I first wrote these poems. And people, when I read it to the store people, the employees, they were like in tears. I don't know if it's because I was leaving or the poem, but or maybe both. Maybe it was both. But it's difficult to predict exactly what art or poem will touch you. And you never really know when a piece of art or poetry will suddenly have a meaning that seems to be particularly for you. I was profoundly and unexpectedly touched and transformed by Amanda Gorman as she shared her poem, The Hill We Climb, at Biden's inauguration. It felt like it was speaking to me. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned the quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what isn't always justice. It fractured me in a way that I couldn't have seen or prepared for. It touched me in such a way that changed. It fractured the way I saw the world. And there was a poem that did that too, but from a spiritual point of view. It was the first time I read this poem so many years ago. It changed the way I see God and the way that my understanding of how to take in the divine changed. It was E. E. Cumming. Many of you may know this poem. I thank you, God, for this amazing day, for leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the Son's birthday. This is the birthday of life and love and wings and the gay, great happening immutably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the know of nothing, human merely being, doubt unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears awake, now the eyes of my eyes are open. That final stanza still stays with me. I hear it all the time when I'm writing or exploring my own inner self. The ears of my ears awake, and the eyes of my eyes are open. It suggested to me, and still does, that we are capable of experiencing something beyond the mere physical. An ineffable hearing, an indescribable seeing. That is what art and poetry has the potential to reveal when we open ourselves to them. We can open our souls for the opportunity that art and poetry offer to touch and be touched by something surpassing the mundane, beyond our normal experiences. And perhaps, as you immerse yourselves in a piece of art, or saturate a poem into your being, and allow it to settle into the core of yourself, you might notice a shimmer or shine. You might find something given to you, or you might be invited to do something. My friends, you might even find yourself transformed. I appreciate y'all being willing to listen to our poetry today. And as closing words, I chose one that Alex sent me. It was one of her favorites. It's Ode by Arthur O'Shaughnessy. And it's just the first stanza. So let me share that with you as we close. We are music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams. World losers and world forsakers, on whom the pale moon gleams. Yet we are the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems. Well, as is the case, I invite us to greet one another. So pull in your mind, find something you'd like to send a blessing out to someone here in the congregation or beyond. Hold it in the front of your mind, and as we say the word blessing together, send that blessing out into the world. Blessing.